What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with yet another 2023-2024 NBA team look ahead. And because I actually know when this one is going up, this is the midway point of the look ahead series, number 15 that I have up before October 1st. So I'm kind of impressed with myself. I'm normally running around like a maniac, and I'm still running around like a maniac, but these might all be up in time. We are on to the New York Knicks, which means it's time for Andrew J. Claudio from Knicks Film School. GMAC, as many of you may know him, does a great job doing basically everything over there. He does everything. Follow him on the Twitter machine at Andrew J. Claudio _. Don't leave out the underscore like I did. It is on the screen. It'll be in the YouTube and podcast descriptions, as will the links to where you can subscribe to Knicks Film School. If you're listening to this podcast and have not subscribed to them already, given the number of times that Grant and I hat tipped them, what the fuck, guys? So go do that. Claudio, how are you doing?
Favale, I'm doing great. Can't complain. Although, as a football fan, I guess I can because of what happened to my quarterback a little over a week and a half ago. But we are here to talk about the stability of a James Dolan-owned franchise known as the New York Knicks. How do you like them apples? How about that for irony? That I'm turning to the Knicks for my safe space where I can't be hurt anymore.
The Knicks, this podcast is always fascinating for me because of how I grew up a Knicks fan.
Mm-hmm.
But they're so steady at the moment. I had trouble with the outline because it was just like, it could have been really short. Like I could have just sent you we could have done this in 7 base questions because they're so continuity has been prioritized there, which is a good thing. So yeah, I mean, let's start with, maybe we should start with any recent events. Do you read anything into James Dolan saying he doesn't like owning sports teams? Or do you read into Julius Randle? I know you guys talked about this on KFS already, leaving CAA.
The CAA thing is more interesting for me, at least. I don't even know what it's interesting in pertaining to. Is it interesting because I think he's going to leave the Knicks? Is it interesting because how closely CAA and the Knicks and their relationship is, or how CAA may run the Knicks, if you believe what's out there? I just think it's been very obvious who gets a certain type of treatment with the Knicks, and it's the CAA clients. The thing about Randle that's fascinating in that sense is you need to be one of two things to be in the cool kids club with the Knicks, a CAA client or a Kentucky grad. So he does still have that going for him, and I wonder if that's enough. He does have ties with the guy that he's going to be working with over at WME. I don't think it's as important a relationship as some Knicks fans are making it out to be. That's why he left CAA. The Dolan thing, a billionaire gave a quote when he was talking about.
That was more of a troll question.
Right. It was a topic of conversation because it's the offseason and Knicks fans need to react to everything in the most non-nuanced way, shape, and form. That's what we're talking about. Those are the Knicks stories at the moment. An all-star, changed representation. The owner has a new building in Vegas that looks like a golf ball, and we're asking him about it, and he was like, "Oh yeah, being an owner is kind of annoying." That. There's nothing up in the air about
look how far we've come.
Right. I'm not worried about whether or not my head coach is liking porn tweets on Twitter or getting in a fight with Matt Barnes or the Charles Oakley getting banned from the Garden. We've come David Fisdale bringing an axe to practice. We're so far removed from those days that I'm just I hope this extension gets done before the season starts.
Yeah, I will say I tend not to buy into I don't think there's a bias against the Knicks and the media, and somehow you and I always stumble into this, but I think people actually appreciate this sentiment that normally probably hate listening to me talk about the Knicks. I did see there was the clip going around, I forget from which podcast, but the way someone was talking about the Knicks and their concerns was just okay, we can make fun of the past and we can even make fun of maybe the structure a little bit of this front office, but they have for the most part proven that they are not incompetent.
Right.
And so the way that it was being discussed was that the Knicks have all this instability and what's going on with Dolan and can you trust their front office? And it's just even the Julius Randle discourse makes me a little uneasy because there are concerns, real, valid concerns about Julius Randle. You don't make 2 All-NBA teams by accident. And so we can talk about how tough his fit would be with other teams. So it's great to see how far the Knicks have come. We're coming up on October. We're not talking about a potential like mega trade, even though like the theories will be out there, but it's not like, oh, fuck, like the Knicks should have went after, they didn't give up enough to go get Donovan Mitchell. So I enjoy kind of just like this stability element because it allows you to focus more on the team that's there. And like those concerns and those fits, even if you're not super high on them, like let's talk about that.
Let's do it.
My first question though, I think we do have to start with last season. And I do find it an instructive exercise when like mega things happened in the playoffs and the dust settles. How much did you read into the circumstances of how they lost to the Heat? Was there anything leading into the offseason that really stuck with you the most that maybe you're even still harping on leading into this season?
So when you sent me this question, I was fascinated by how you worded it with the circumstances of their loss to the Heat. I got to be honest, when the dust settled and I really looked at last season, and I think this has been a common thing with a lot of us over at Knicks Film School, I think the Knicks can hold their head high that they're the East team that gave the Heat the most trouble. And I know like you don't want to claim a moral victory, and that's kind of cliche, but for a franchise that hasn't claimed a lot of victories, period, over the last 2 decades, I think I'm going to claim that moral victory.
Especially with the criticism that they received from this podcast. They haven't gone up yet, but we did our regrades for like last offseason and revisited what we said. Some of the shit that I said about the Jalen Brunson acquisition, I want to make nothing to do with the contract. That's what everyone goes to. Like they thought, no, I was all about the machinations and what I thought it said about their vision. I missed. Like you absolutely celebrate. What was there? We both smashed the over because it wasn't there over under like 37 or something.
It got down to 37 by opening night. Yeah. And they had 47
that's not a moral victory.
Year.
They obliterated X. They won a playoff series against a team. I picked the Cavs to beat them. And did I pick the Knicks because I did my whatever?
No, you picked the Cavs. I remember.
I did. Cavs in 6. I think I probably won, or Cavs in 7. You won a playoff series against a team that I don't have receipts, but I would argue most people pick Cleveland to win that series.
The Cleveland was favored to win the series too, which is why it wasn't a crazy thing when you were leading up during our series preview with a lot of people saying that the Cavs were going to win. Even more so, like all the research we did on the Cavs last year leading up to that series was like, oh, this is a really good basketball team, and it's why like I was talking to John the eve of the first playoff game, and we were both saying like, why are we not more excited about this series? And we both came to the conclusions because every single thing that we read about the Cavs and research the Cavs, it's like, oh, they're probably going to win this series. They're really good. And to see the way the Knicks thoroughly dominated them, like you have Mitchell and Allen and these introspective quotes that are out there of like, am I tough enough? Did I not meet the bright lights of the playoffs in New York City with the right frame of mind? And look, that might just be like a young player getting his first taste of playoff basketball, not Mitchell, but like Jared Allen and Evan Mobley and these guys that have never been in this situation. And like the Knicks rose to the occasion. And I remember the night that they clinched or they beat the Cavs, they won the series in 5. You had to sit there and be like, it's house money from here. If you had them winning a playoff series, not even just any playoff series, but the Donovan Mitchell Bull, they're the team that didn't trade for him and then beat him in a 5-game series. Like the rest has to be house money. And for as much as the Heat showed up to the playoffs as an 8th seed that has struggled most of the year, and if you wanted to discount like what they had accomplished, like almost lost in the play-in, like we forget they're like 3 minutes away and a couple of Max Strus threes away from losing to the Bulls in that 4th quarter.
Look, if DeMar allowed DeAr DeRozan to come to that game, we might be talking about a completely different. That's all I'm saying.
You never know. Maybe the Knicks are in the conference finals, and that's a whole different story. But like, I thought that was a different Miami Heat team that at a certain point, like because they've been there, they're able to rely on their experience. I wasn't disappointed, but I was annoyed that they lost the series. I was like sad that the season was over, but I had a lot of respect for that Heat team, especially when they went up 3-0 on the Cavs, especially when they beat the Cavs. And then through 2 games of that Nuggets series, it was like, are they going to do this again? And then, the basketball gods finally decided that they weren't going to shoot 40% from 3 in every series. But yeah, I leave last season with so many more positives and negatives, including what ended up being their downfall in that series against the Heat.
I think the challenge of having a season like that, and that's why I phrased the question this way, is now you have to progress forward. And I think a lot of people struggle to understand that growth isn't linear. Like the Knicks could technically have a worse record, but maybe be a better basketball team. Like maybe you just trust their half court offense more outside of getting rebounds type deal, or like Jalen Brunson having to ISO his way to, 30 points or whatever. And I received a lot of criticism from an unflattering subset of Knicks Twitter earlier this offseason because I said if I had to bet against them being better or worse, it would be worse because I don't think that they solved some of their biggest issues, in part because I don't think this offseason was set up to solve some of their biggest issues. And I think a lot of people, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back here, but when you're giving the analysis of, this Knicks offseason wasn't very splashy, it wasn't supposed to be. Like, it just wasn't set up to be. And so what do you make of their offseason relative to that? Where a lot of people are like, they should have been more aggressive on the trade front versus no, that's separate from what reality is. Like, this is what they were able to do. So just what were your general impressions of how they did this offseason overall?
I don't understand anybody that says they needed to be more aggressive. I don't see the move that's out there that they needed to make. This isn't really a buyer's market at the moment. Unless you were all in on Dame and all in on James Harden trade at this point, there wasn't an obvious trade to make for the Knicks for what their needs are. Like you said, any issues that they may have on the roster were not going to be solved. The Obi situation needed to be resolved. They did. They needed more shooting, and they got a guy that I think is going to at least incrementally improve their shooting. They solved 2 of their issues.
You told me off air. You said, I think the words you used were second coming of Steph Curry.
I did. See, the things you say off the record are supposed to stay off the record, Dan.
That's why I've never been a capital J journalist.
Gotcha. I think they're in pole position when it becomes a buyer's market again. And there was conversations that we were here. So it's funny. We heard that they were having conversations. They were interested in OG Anunoby, and that there was some Knicks Raptors talk. And then what news came out of the Knicks and Raptors that the Knicks are suing the Raptors in civil court. So I don't know if that takes that off the table or not, but as far as I'm concerned, I was satisfied with the Knicks offseason. I thought they got better this offseason. I don't know how much better, but I like the options that this current roster is going to now have going into this season. And the truth of the matter is, the big move that they made this offseason happened at last year's deadline and getting Josh Hart. And they've hit a whole different ceiling with him on the roster and could do so many different things with him on the team. And I'm all in on this Knicks Villanova version that they rode to a lot of success last season.
I would argue the biggest move of the offseason was actually Josh Hart's you up tweet to Mikal Bridges or whatever that was. I think that was the most important move of the offseason.
If it wasn't for the fact that the Nets and the Knicks haven't made a trade with each other since Reagan was running for re-election, I'd be all in on we're 1 away. They got Arcidiacono on an Exhibit 10. So we're 1 away. What's a Nets Knicks trade to make it happen? And it's not happening. He's gonna have to go to another team that then also doesn't want him, and then he'll go to the Knicks. But for now, we'll settle for RJ Barrett.
So, do you think Donte DiVincenzo provides enough shooting and movement to really jazz up this offense?
So there's 2 different questions there. The shooting, I think he does. If it's simply that he's taking all of Obi Toppin's 3-point attempts, and I have it here, last season, DiVincenzo shot 39% overall, 39.7 from 3, 43% from the corners, and it's 40% in one corner, 48% in the other. And ironically, that 48% is the highest in the league from that spot, that corner. The opposite 3-point corner, the Knicks have Quentin Grimes, who shot 47%. So they have the 2 guys that shot the highest percentage from both corners last year, which I think can come in handy when you have them probably interchanging with each other on the court at all times. The simple adjustment of every Obi corner three that he probably shouldn't have been taking in the first place is now going to be taken by a guy that's good from the corners. It makes the team better. It is a version of the Knicks that I can get behind. Not for nothing, but he might take some of Josh Hart's threes next season. And
does Josh Hart have threes that you can take?
So like that's the thing. He was taking 2 a game, and there'd be like a couple games where he'd take 5. Like here's the other part. Maybe Josh Hart taking some of Obi Toppin's threes from last season as now your backup 4 slowly makes them have more shooting as a result of the adjustment of him moving into the backup 4 role. That's the shooting side of it. The movement, I mean, that remains to be seen.
Oh, really? That's the sorry to interrupt. That's the one I'm actually more
that's the conversation in. About Tibbs and about the offense. Like it was.
Great point. Yeah, I'm looking at the player. The answer is yes, but will he be allowed to provide the movement that we're probably? Okay. That's fair.
It's like it's the $1 million question. The Knicks had an outstanding offensive rating last year. It played to their strengths the way that they play. This penetrate, get to the rim, everybody crash the boards, ton of isolation. It's a read and react offense. It's why I think they went and got another corner boy in Donte DiVincenzo, because if you drive and 2 guys collapse, the corners will be open. And for half the season, they were learning the offense. You'd have RJ with tunnel vision. You'd have Julius with tunnel vision. You'd have Jalen Brunson at time with tunnel vision. And as the season went along, they started to find the corners. I'm curious if a summer around Steve Kerr and Eric Spoelstra for Tom Thibodeau inspired the thought of more ball movement and some more screening and more pick and roll. I'm not as optimistic as maybe some that they're going to change up too much, because I do think the strength of this team is still its physicality, and they're taking advantage of the offensive boards. But I could be wrong. Maybe the old dog can learn some new tricks. To relay all this to DiVincenzo, like I do think he can add that element. It remains to be seen if he will be adding that new element.
I think my concern is when you look at and again, I want to reiterate that I don't think this was out there. I don't think it's bad that they signed Donte DiVincenzo. I think he is a intriguing fit, if not a good fit. But this idea that he kind of fills the role, which I saw floating around, which is why it's a concern, that he's some caps lock, higher volume shooter. That's not like what he's historically been. I think him being around like 8 3-point attempts per 36 minutes the past 2 years, that is great volume. You mentioned the corners. I think that's great. Corner 3-point attempts are still at the Knicks like peak. That's still only 12% of their shots coming from the offense. And Donte DiVincenzo specifically, yes, been good from the corners. He's also only shot overall, like part of really spacing the floor is like, can you hit those above the breaks? He's been shaky above the break up and down throughout his career. He's only shot better than like 36% on catch and shoot threes twice in his career. And look, he had at basically every stop. Sacramento was weird. It was post-injury, that era in Sacramento, what was happening. Like he's had great guys like looking at Milwaukee spoon feeding him. And so it's not like, oh, he gets to play with Jalen Brunson now. This is fine. So I think he's a good fit. I'm just curious whether we see what the Knicks need most. Like, does he nudge it enough to where we see a material difference? Because it might be a different type of player that they need. And again, that player wasn't out there. So go ahead and get Donte DiVincenzo. I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm just concerned that the expectations for his impact are being set a little too high, or maybe being divorced a little bit from what they will be in reality.
So I'm not sure. I hope I'm not projecting that I think
not you specifically, except for your Steph Curry comment off the air.
I mean, you see greatness, you recognize it, you acknowledge it, Dan. I think they're going to be better. Like it's not. I don't think they're going to be one of the best. He's going to take all of Obi Toppin's 3-pointers from last year. Obi Toppin came into this league after shooting 102 3-pointers in college and was told, like, go corner to corner. Like, that's what we're asking you. Like, he did also shoot above the break threes too, and had one stretch where he was shooting 37% for like 2 months and then regressed back to what he probably is, which is a guy that should be taking 2 to 3 threes a game while running rim to rim and releasing on the break and getting easy buckets that way instead, and take advantage of his vertical spacing rather than his on-court spacing. I think DiVincenzo in that role, and then just being able to go Josh Hart at the 4 rather than Obi at the 4 it'll fit a lot better. And especially we have no idea what RJ is going to be this year.
So it's just like every year.
It's just like it's a thing. Like if RJ's not hitting his threes, then he and Hart end up being like, it becomes even more important for you to have another shooter out there, because teams just went zone against the Knicks second unit so many times. I mean, shit, they went zone against their first unit so many times. And so it was very easy to find ways to stop them. And I think DiVincenzo adds an element that can help break those zones whenever they get stuck facing one.
Is there, like, should we bank on there being more 3-point volume from Josh Hart this year? Because I'm a very big believer in the volume itself. Forget about the percentages for a second. Defenses defend you differently when they know that you're not actively avoiding that shot. And Josh Hart, at times, you mentioned there were stretches where he didn't. In Portland, we saw it in New Orleans a little bit. Definitely saw it in New York. Like, he actively avoids taking 3-pointers for these long stretches.
So it's funny, when he first got to New York, he said that one of the first things Tibbs said to him was, "You've got the green light. Like, let it fly. You take as many threes as they'll give you." And for a while, it seemed like he found like a niche, and he shot pretty well from 3 when he first became a Knick. And it was, I don't think this will last long, but like, we'll ride this for as long as we can. And the volume went down. And then the first round series against the Cavs, he shot really well from 3. And then the Heat series happened. And what you're talking about and how the Heat guarded him and said, if Josh Hart beats us from 3, then Josh Hart beat us from 3. And in game 2, he did. And then by game 3, when Josh Hart was having offers from 3 between game 1 and game 3, the Knicks finally went back to their starting lineup that worked for most of the year with Quentin Grimes. And it was too late at that point to save the season. And it's why because he's coming in as your backup 4, I don't see the need for his 3-point volume to go up as much. If he was still playing your traditional 3 or 2, whichever lineups he was going to play, maybe, but he can kind of be like the Draymond role to an extent, although Draymond next to Looney, it doesn't have the most amount of spacing, but like, because Hart's going to play the backup 4, I think he can get away with his 1 to 2 3-pointers a game, or even fewer. And as of right now, I'm not as concerned about his volume going up.
I will take the other round. I want to see it go up. Like, I would like to see it double, like just
to 4.
Yeah. And I think it's a testament. I do think it's a testament to the fact what you're saying, what he does as a defender, as sort of a pace setter, ball mover for this team, that you're comfortable with him taking 1.5, 2 attempts per game because you know how much value he's providing elsewhere. I just think I'm not even talking about makes. And like, I mean, he did shoot. What was he at last year when he was with the Knicks? Like 51% from 3, 52.
Yeah. Which
so
again,
like,
I'm not sold on that being a realistic thing for him to keep over a season, you know?
So I would like to see it go up. I'm just curious to see whether it will. He remains incredibly important to the team either way. I think the extension, by the way, was fine, especially when it's reviewed against the cap going up. It's kind of tacked onto his current deal. He's never going to be making more than 12% of the cap. So I'm just fascinated because like they've kind of leaned into these guys who, like, without having these, unless you're going to play Evan Fournier a bunch of minutes, like you just don't have a ton of guys that are going to come in and just get you a bunch of looks from 3 or get off a bunch of looks from 3.
First of all, guess what's not going to happen? Playing Evan Fournier a bunch of minutes. I think it's important for him to get his volume up, and this may be the case. If Tibbs is determined to play him next to RJ and Mitch in consistent stretches, because this is like my biggest criticism of Tibbs. Like, the RJ Josh Hart lineup can't happen. Like, it cannot. It's a thing that just did not work last season when Hart came over. I've got some lineup data that I went and got. So if you've got RJ and Hart and Mitch together in 90 minutes last year, was a negative 18.4 net rating per point.
What was the offensive rating on that? Probably sub 100.
Under 100. Yeah. So it's like, it was really, really bad. But when you switch out Mitch for Isaiah Hartenstein, who's not always in the dunker spot, so this allows RJ and Hart to either get to the rim, or maybe you have to honor their 3-point shooting. It's a plus 11. Then you add Quentin Grimes to that. lineup, and it's plus. Now this is an 18 minutes we're talking about, but it's a plus 29.5. Then you add how do I have this? Immanuel Quickley to that, and it's plus 25. Like, I'm solely looking at the bench units here because that's what we're talking about, is when Immanuel Quickley is on with the two of them, when Quentin Grimes, you might play some backup minutes, or basically if you swap out Quentin Grimes or Donte DiVincenzo, it works in that same type of format. And then if you take Mitch out, who is like 4 to 6 feet away from the rim at all times, then the rim might be open a bit. They ran the offense with Isaiah Hartenstein at the 3-point line, or the foul line extended from time to time last year. So you were able to see what this team looks like when the rim is open. For Josh Hart, for Immanuel Quickley, for RJ Barrett. And I think the Josh Hart volume on threes can stay where it's at if you're playing him in the right lineups. If you've got Mitch and RJ, and especially Julius out there, then yeah, he's your other shooter. Like, teams are going to play zone, and it's like, okay, like, it's Jalen Brunson has to take contested threes, or one of RJ, Julius, or Josh Hart are going to have to take threes. So it's my biggest criticism of Tibbs, is to put the lineups with spacing out there, or with shooting out there. And the biggest thing you can do is to split up RJ and Josh Hart minutes as much as you humanly possibly can.
Immanuel Quickley, I feel like there's so much to talk about with him. Let's begin with actually last season. What impressed you the most about his development? Maybe even something that was missed, because he did enter sort of the national lexicon at some point last year when he really started to take off. Maybe that flew under the radar about his development.
So, like, it's like you just hit on it. Like, it's tough to say that someone that finished second in Sixth Man of the Year didn't receive enough recognition. Even if I thought he should have finished first in Sixth Man of the Year. Not that I'm rehashing old arguments with Dan Favale, but that's neither here nor there.
I often would suggest that maybe the right player won Sixth Man of the Year.
It seems as if the availability of Malcolm Brogdon was as much of a deficiency during the regular season as it was during the playoffs, Dan Favale.
The Clippers agree.
The Clippers. Look, I think he finally got the opportunity when they went to a 9-man rotation to just show like what he can do if given the opportunity. And like his per 36 numbers were around the same when he finally started to get the rotation minutes. When they took Fournier out, when they took Cam Reddish out, when they took Derrick Rose out, and just said quickly, you're the backup point guard. At times you're going to play next to Jalen Brunson, and he really showed some off-ball defense. And it goes. The underrated part is his rebounding. Like, he was an outstanding defensive rebounder for long stretches last year. In fact, he got hurt in the playoffs in Game 3 against the Heat, and then in Game 4, when he wasn't there, the Heat got like 11 offensive rebounds because he was always getting to the line. Like, that's a Tibbs principle, as he preaches to his guards, get to the free throw line on 3-point attempts. And the Heat were doing that, like beating them at their own game all throughout Game 4 and the rest of the series. So I have so many good things to say about Immanuel Quickley. Also, it's a bit of a cherry picked stat, but I looked this up on the offensive end. There were only 39 players last year that shot at least 453s and 452s. There are only 39 players that did both of those last year, and Immanuel Quickley grades out at about the top 15 in efficiency. It's around the exact same spot as Jason Tatum. I'm not saying Immanuel Quickley is Jason Tatum. I'm saying on that type of shot diet, he was pretty damn efficient. And, from a sixth man perspective, I think getting that type of impact, that type of value in that spot is partly why they were able to be kind of fine when Jalen Brunson wasn't on the floor. This wasn't just like Jalen Brunson carried the Knicks to the 5 seed and 47 wins. Like, they had a lot of depth on this team and coming from impactful places lower down the roster.
Also, a friendly reminder, even as someone who did not pick him to win Sixth Man of the Year, that filling in the starting lineup when there are injuries is part of being the sixth man. That is part of the body of work. So
that's right.
I was very impressed during the regular season, at least, with his live dribble decision-making. I thought came a long way. And then the defense, like you said. The playoffs, however, were like pretty disastrous for him. did they change how you view him at all? Was it the ball handling that worried you the most? Was it him just like felt like he was being knocked off his spots or not getting to his spots? Was it just, what do you take away from his playoff campaign?
Yeah, deer in headlights has been the perfect description.
Him and Evan Mobley both, apparently. So there you go.
Man, it's the tough part about the postseason for me is that I love the playoff win and getting past the Cavs, and even the 2 wins against the Heat were pretty fun and the Garden was amazing, and I don't get to celebrate any of it with Immanuel Quickley or his success. He did have some moments in the Cavs series, like games 3 and game 4. He was on the court.
What was the garbage time game? He got like 10 of his 12 points. Or was that game 3? I can't remember what that was.
So that might have been game 3 of the Heat series when he came in for garbage time. Point being, the way I'm trying to compartmentalize his season is that like the 82 game sample is the more impressive thing. The playoffs are absolutely disappointing. Jalen Brunson in his first playoffs with the Mavericks was so disastrous that he was losing minutes to Trey Burke by game 7. So Rome wasn't built in a day. Certain young players take playoff failures early on in their career and they turn it into making them better and making them more successful. And if there's one thing that Immanuel Quickley has shown Knicks fans over the years, it's that he's going to take every learning experience he can to get better. And I'm trusting that he'll do that this offseason.
I do think because the playoffs matter just a ton, especially with an aspiration, the aspirations that the Knicks have. What is it like? How does it impact how you view a potential extension that I think we all do expect? I would probably bet on it getting done rather than not getting done. Is there like, what is the number, like the highest number that you're like, okay, like this is fine? Because when we had this podcast, well, I don't know if it was this podcast, but you and I were podcasting sometime last season. I think we came up with like 110 million.
Yeah.
We would have been okay with. Is that still the number? Has that changed at all for you?
I'm hoping they can settle around 4 for 90. I would go to 4104. Puts him in the ballpark of RJ, Brunson, Randle. They've done a good job of there's no clear alpha contract wise on this team. Look, I think you can heal a lot of any potential issues with the minutes that are going to be distributed this year. I think Josh Hart's going to play a lot of crunch time this year. And as a result, that really leaves one rotation spot or one a court spot for 4 people between DiVincenzo, Grimes, RJ, and Quickley. And if Quickley's like approaching restricted free agency, that could lead to some issues in the locker room. And I think all of that goes away if you just pay him like a starter. And if you pay him 4104, which as every single NBA podcast out there acknowledges, with the cap going up, that contract's going to look fine, especially if a team trades for him and wants to start him. So I'm at 4104, maybe put incentives in there. And so it's a 490 that can get to 104. He's such an important piece to what they're going to need to be this year. Like, God forbid Jalen Brunson gets hurt. Here's Immanuel Quickley. He can be your backup point guard for however long he's out. And while there is a drop-off in my mind, it's not enough of a drop-off that he still can't help you win games.
I think I'd probably be fine with that number, but I do think, again, I think it's more of a negotiation now just because of how the playoffs unfold. And it seems like kind of unfair to read into such a small sample size, but it's such an important like time of the year. Like it's such an important sample size that I do think it becomes more of a negotiation based off what just happened.
Dan, if he had a good playoffs, like if they had gotten to the conference finals and Quickley had a couple games where it's like, oh, they had a Quickley game, I think we're talking 4-120. Like that's how good he was last season. And then what the playoffs might have potentially cost him. I think they probably started at 4 for 80 or 4 for 84. And you've heard I'm sure you've read the stuff about how he wants 9 figures, which is why I said, like, if there's any potential dysfunction or dissension in the locker room that could come from his camp because he's losing minutes and is restricted free agency, the way you avoid that is to just pay him like a starter. And he could play 16 minutes one game because RJ's going off, or you want to close with DiVincenzo or Grimes, and it's like, okay, like that's fine. I got paid. Like there's no issues here anymore.
Julius, formerly of CAA, Randle,
dead to me.
One of the most divisive players in the league. I said it at the top. It's for someone who made 2 All-NBA teams, even if you wouldn't have voted for him in either season, just absolutely, it's interesting because of how he's viewed. I'll use the word interesting, and it's bizarre. I do think last season, what he probably didn't receive enough credit for in the regular season, I thought he did a better job of playing within the larger context of the team. I think a lot of it could have been incremental. You start digging into the type of touches he was using, how long he was holding the ball, though. I think there was a real, even if it wasn't an effort, there was a real difference. However, we're now we've gone through another playoff campaign. I know he was banged up, but it under-delivering there. Looks like he can kind of be out of sorts. We'll get to RJ Barrett, but RJ Barrett has all the success driving it on the ball. Where are you at on Julius Randle? What makes him so divisive? Do you view him as we'll get to that when we talk to RJ Barrett, but where are you just at with Julius Randle? He's been in the league forever now, but he's on this team. What are you watching most closely for at this point relative to his fit with this on this roster?
So I will start here. I think the further I got away from the playoffs, the more I empathized with the 2 ankle injuries. By all accounts, he wasn't healthy when he played game 1 in Cleveland, and it showed. He just didn't have the same burst that he used to. He really he was kind of out there as a decoy for a lot of the Cavs series. And in the Heat series, he did play better, but guess what? Last game of the Cavs series, when he was actually playing well in that first half of game 5, lands on Karis LeVert's ankle, the exact same injury he suffered against the Heat during the regular season. And so then he comes back and only misses 1 game. And, I accept the playoff numbers for what they are and how bad he was. And it's tough. There's no defending him. I think I'm able to compartmentalize and at least not give him a pass, but the guy did have 2 really bad ankle injuries, suffer, and then had surgery after the season. And you're at least to be able to be he was playing hurt. You're out there. There's no excuses for performance. You have to, if you're on the court, you're healthy enough to play. And I have to judge that. I can at least contextualize it to he was out there playing on a bad ankle. As far as what Julius Randle is, I'm Joe Pesci in The Irishman. It is what it is. I don't think there's another level for him to get to. I was impressed at the 3-point volume last year and his willingness to shoot 9 attempts per 36 minutes. I think he needed to for what that offense was. They were going to need that type of volume from him, especially if RJ was going to have the regular season that he had. And look, as you said, not a lot of Knicks have made All-NBA twice in their franchise. That is grading him against other Knicks, which might not be the best, grading rubric to use, but I accept him for what he is,
I want to interject here. He made All-NBA twice. There are only 15 All-NBA spots. I don't want to hear that if so-and-so played in more games. I don't want to hear you weighted Julius Randle's availability looking at his minutes played too much. I don't want to hear that they just got rid of positions. Making All-NBA, caveats and all, is fucking difficult. Yeah. And so I'm not the biggest Julius Randle guy. He's a 2-time All-NBA player. That's not something that you can just write off. If you want to have the discussion about he's just such a unique player and his fit is so specific, or it's so tough if you don't want him to play the way he's playing in New York, that's a fine discussion to have. He still has made 2 All-NBA teams, and it was not, even if you didn't vote for him, it was not completely undeserved, on accident, fueled by injuries are part of every NBA season. So let me just interject there with a little bit of and you're not that you have not been disparaging his All-NBA appearances. I just think I recognize that I don't think he has a ton of trade value, but he's incredibly valuable in his role right now for the most part. And that led to 2 All-NBA appearances. So I find it weird that we can't sort of separate the compartmentalize the two. Julius Randle's a flawed player who he's more valuable to the Knicks than any other team, but Julius Randle is also a pretty useful basketball player in the role that he is playing right now.
I just 25, 10, and 6 is not something to sneeze at, And I know counting stats aren't valued the way they used to be, but they're
Kelly
not.
Oubre Jr. is proof. Average 20 points a game, signs a minimum deal. That's
clearly, but also like the guy did also like the impact metrics also grayed out that he's not. I think he's a pretty impactful player too because of his defensive rebounding and what he can give you on that end of the floor. Yeah, I think a lot as far as Knicks fans are concerned. I think he's just gonna have to have a monster playoff once, and all these questions get answered. Like dominate a playoff series, be the reason the Knicks won a playoff series. And this is gonna turn into an RJ conversation, I'm pretty sure. So, like RJ had a miserable regular season, and the takeaway from last season for him is 8 playoff games. And Julius had an outstanding regular season, and the takeaway for him is like 8 playoff games. And it works the exact opposite. And it's funny how like every other year, Knicks fans have to choose between the two, and they've made it really easy at times. They've never both been good at the same time or both been bad at the same time. It's always like, oh, I'm definitely on Julius' side this time. I'm definitely on RJ's side this time,
With RJ, I think I think why people might have glom on to what he did in the playoffs was that it was basically a proof of concept because of what he was doing. If he does this, if he's given this opportunity, and John wrote about this, it was a fantastic piece. I think it was earlier this offseason in his newsletter. I don't know how many weeks ago. I did quote it in the outline I sent you. RJ has these incredible numbers over like the final 8 games of the playoffs or whatever it was. And John presented this caveat, and it's one that you and I have talked about on this podcast, on the Knicks Film School podcast. It is so abundantly clear he is most comfortable and best when he has the on-ball opportunity, not just because we're worried about his three-point shooting numbers, but it feels like it opens up the rest of his game, and that's like the most useful version of him. What is the path forward for this RJ and Julius Randle dynamic? Because for so much of the hand wringing over like, oh, it's going to eventually be Randle or Obi. And it was like, no, it was never Randle or Obi because Randle was clearly way better than Obi. It feels like a Randle or RJ discussion if it needs to be had. I'm asking you if you see a path forward with them together or if you view it in the same vein. Who's the one that's going to have the larger conceit if this dynamic is going to work? Just take it wherever you want. But that is this might be the single most fascinating question for me entering the next season is just this RJ and Julius Randle, not necessarily the dynamic together, but like, how does this look moving forward if it's going to be together long-term?
So as I was just teasing, like Knicks fans know it's one or the other. Like Knicks fans have come to terms with the fact that it's going to end up having to be either Julius or RJ. I think 2 years ago, it was very clear who Knicks fans chose after the season Julius had. And the last like 3 months of the season, what RJ was with a 30 usage. And I was like, all right, this is inefficient, but it's 24 a game. Like you can't fully discredit it. John has the theory that they were trying to boost his trade value for Donovan Mitchell, which we all saw how that went. And then last season, I mean, I want to talk about fall off a cliff. And look, you could say the on-ball reps is what he wants and what he needs. The guy ran the second unit. Like it's not like he wasn't getting on-ball reps. It wasn't like they weren't calling plays for him. This isn't a guy that, when Julius isn't there, gets a 26 usage. This is a guy throughout last season, finished the season with a 26 usage. That's not low. It's the third highest usage on the team. If you're saying he should be the second highest usage, that's a different conversation and a different roster construction. And look, if Julius gets hurt this year, you're going to see it because guess who's the backup 4 right now? Josh Hart, which works in concept, but as the starting 4 might look a little different. I think at least for this season, it's really going to be on Tibbs to figure out the right lineups that they play together. Like I think with Hartenstein, so that way the rim is more free at times, will be good to make sure that you have one of DiVincenzo, Grimes, or Quickley on at all times next to Julius and RJ will be important. Like the funny, maybe the best kept secret, or maybe the not the best kept secret, but like the more forgotten timeline of last season is RJ stopped playing crunch time after Josh Hart got traded to the Knicks. Like, was not playing in closing minutes, and the Knicks were better as a result. So, there will be certain games that maybe RJ doesn't play in crunch time, and it stinks to say that. And you'd love to think that what we saw in the playoffs ignited something and maybe did prove a concept that a lot of RJ Barrett stands out there have said needed to happen. I'm not so sure that it will necessarily lead to more minutes and a big change next season.
That is a real problem though, because he is starting the 4-year, $107 million extension. And
he is.
I think what you outlaid is what's best for this team. If you are eventually trying to pick between these guys, or you've already made your choice and you think that it's Julius Randle, that is not RJ Barrett could kill it like in that role. But if he's not closing games for you because you view him as that much of a liability under your current roster construction, it messes with his trade value. It could mess with he got paid, so maybe it won't mess with the dynamics of the team. And this doesn't get talked about enough, I think, outside of Knicks circles. Like the vibes coming from that Knicks team last year were just immaculate. Like they are clearly just like close and get along behind the scenes, which not mission critical, but like that's pretty, like that's a good luxury to have. So I'm so fascinated by it. I still believe that if he could be on the floor as the second primary ball handler and there's like 3 positive shooters around him. I mean, you talked about this already. I think that's not just the pathway forward. I actually do think that is when we'll see consistent attack mode, more efficient, opened up his game. RJ, I still fully believe that. Is that more valuable than what Julius Randle brings to the table? I honestly have no idea. Positionally, because he's 6'7", maybe. But like RJ Barrett regressed defensively last season. And if that continues, this becomes a whole different discussion.
And that's the thing. The defensive side of the ball I haven't even talked about. My bigger issue, and I had to make sure I went and got the stats to remind myself how bad he was last year. Like, you've got to shoot better than 31% from 3 for me to be like, oh, we just need you to like we're going to take away all your 3-pointers. So because you're not good there. And if you're then going to tell me that he needs to be getting to the rim with his on ball reps and his passing, well, you need more than 2.5 assists a game. You need more than less than 50% from 2 last season. Like, yes, he gets to the rim at will. It doesn't change the fact that he's not good when he gets to the rim. He was better last year, don't get me wrong, but like, you have to be a more efficient player for me to then demand you get more shots. Now, again, some of this does fall on the head coach. Like, I'm not someone that like thinks anything Tibbs touches is he's not King Midas. I do think you need to deploy RJ in the correct lineup, specifically ones that don't have Josh Hart and don't have Mitchell Robinson. But that's a reserve. Like that's a very specific thing. You could play Julius in a lot of lineups, and especially at the shot making ability that Julius had last season. It's why I think I'm going to always lean in that direction. If RJ becomes more efficient this year, I'm not even saying like he doesn't have to be a 50, 40, 90 guy. I'll settle for 44, 36, like 80 at this point. Like I'll settle for Immanuel Quickley splits last season, which is why it became very evident Quickley's his third best player on this team. Quickley's the third reason why this team is going to be the 5 seed and make it to the second round. The playoffs were great. I will always appreciate what those 8 games were. The regular season sample size is going to have to start to mirror it more for me to start making like X's and O strategies around making sure we cater the team to RJ's strengths,
And also, if we're going to criticize Julius Randle for being such a unique and specific fit, then you need to do the same thing for RJ Barrett.
Exactly.
What we're talking about. I will say, I think he was at like 43 or 44% from mid-range in the playoffs. That better not embolden him to take more mid-range. I don't want to see it. Get that guard. Like that probably needs to be eradicated from his game. He's taken almost like a third of his attempts from there. And that's just, you have not proved to me that you have like any sort of pull-up game, or that you like just from the, like your jump shot is just not something we could trust. So I'd like to see him cut down on those. Maybe that helps your efficiency. I do think some of the rim stuff, when you're watching him, a lot of it's on him. Some of the other stuff is like, all right, well, if this was a little bit more open around here, it could be better. But But again, it gets into why are you tailoring your roster construction to RJ Barrett when he is not compared to Julius Randle? Julius Randle's played better over a much larger sample to warrant that consideration. Whether you want to give either of them that consideration, different matter altogether.
And look, I feel like I've been way too negative about RJ. I need to emphasize how much of a revelation those 8 playoff games were. Like the same way that I understand people having their hesitations about Quickley after last year's playoffs are why I also join in the celebration of what RJ was. They don't beat the Cavs without RJ Barrett. We were wondering if he was going to get benched after that second Cleveland game. And he showed up, and a shook Cleveland team was on the floor. And honestly, a shook Knicks team was on the floor, except RJ Barrett in game 3. And then he puts up almost 30 in game 4. And then he's with a hobbled Julius and whatever, like a short-circuited Immanuel Quickley. RJ Barrett is the one keeping them in games in the Heat series. Like, I have to acknowledge how great he was. And I'm like rooting for him to duplicate that over an 82 game sample this upcoming season. And I think he's going to get the opportunity, and at least for one more year, you know?
What should we be watching, monitoring most closely for Quentin Grimes year 3?
So because he, like, next year he will be extension eligible. And he's like the minutes are going to be tricky to navigate this year because of the acquisition of well, not the acquisition, the signing of DiVincenzo, and then what Quentin Grimes' minutes became with Josh Hart. I've been reading a lot about, not reading a lot of, but I've been taking note of his workouts with JJ Redick. I'm hoping that that leads to more of emulating the guy's career and emulating the guy's game. I hate to bring up coaching again, but he's gonna need the Evan Fournier playbook. I don't need him to just get 2 3-point attempts a game, maybe on penetrating kicks. I think you can call plays like pin downs, pick and pops. Like, you can do stuff for Quentin Grimes to say, this is the shot like we're trying to get in this offense. It doesn't just have to be corner threes or above the break threes. You can actually run a play to get him open so he knows where his shots are coming from. I think that's the biggest thing I'm looking for with Grimes is he going to get enough shots, or specifically know, like, is he going to be able to keep the same efficiency from 3 without always knowing where his shots are coming from? But even more so, is he going to be on a roster that actually knows to make sure shots are going to come for him? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And is that like a concern at all when you're not looking at just him, but even RJ Barrett, Immanuel Quickley, if you want to throw Deuce McBride in there, go ahead. Like, this current roster setup, there's I would say maybe dirt's too strong of a word, but shooting is still a concern. Let's put it there. And you have this surplus of ball dominance in the sense that, okay, there's Jalen Brunson, there's Julius Randle, and then there's other guys who would prefer to operate on ball, looking at Immanuel Quickley, looking at RJ Barrett. We want to talk about, can we get plays called for Quentin Grimes off the ball? Okay, fine. But if you want Quentin Grimes to like drive a little bit more, get him some on-ball reps, is this, and you can, maybe it's like, is it not necessarily conducive to steps forward from these young guys? Or is there one player of those 3 core youngsters that stands to see their development and opportunity limited the most because of the way that this roster is built?
If it's contributing to winning, yes. And it's like kind of a cop-out answer, but like, I'm not, like we just talked about it, I'm not gonna like make sure RJ has on-ball reps if it's at the expense of, like, we just want to see what this looks like, right? Like, I know what this looks like when you have Jalen Brunson on ball reps. I know what it looks like when you have Julius Randle on ball reps. I think this team came up with a strategy that worked really well, especially post Josh Hart trade. And as like the growth and development, this is not a team that's rebuilding. This isn't a team that is necessarily, trying to maximize. I don't want to say it's not important that these guys get better and like who cares? But at the end of the day, like I'm looking for a team that's trying to win as many games as possible next year. Like this, like you said, like this is the team that is going to at least want to, if not win the same number of games as they did a year ago, they're at least going to want to make the playoffs and get as far as they did a year ago, which is going to be even more difficult. And unfortunately, that might mean that, some of these guys take more linear moves in development than they do, gigantic steps forward. Now, look, if you want to actually give you, I already mentioned the worry, and it's that there's one crunch time spot for 4 guys on this roster, and I have no idea how Tibbs is going to navigate this. I think it's going to be Brunson, it's going to be Randle, it's going to be a center, and then I think it's going to be Josh Hart. I think Josh Hart, as much as I love him and think he's a highly impactful player, and he's Jalen Brunson's boy from Villanova, I think his spot should be up for grabs. I'm realistic to the fact that he can miss a crunch time here and there if someone else has it going, or if it's matchup dependent. And I think Quickley and
I hope
RJ,
it's the latter, not to step on the toes of a later question, but I hope that the way they look at closing games, just because of how their personnel shakes out, I do hope Tibbs builds it more around matchups. I mean, who has it going? It's kind of the same thing. I hope it's more fluid. It's I get the Randle and Jalen Brunson locks. Fine. I
and
understand.
a center. And a center. It can't just be there's a 4 guaranteed crunch time spots. Because then, if RJ has it going, it's him or Josh Hart. That has to be the case. If Quickley has it going, honestly, Quickley would be my guarantee. And then it's the 3 spot that is up for grabs. But I recognize there will be a night where they need more size. So you go with RJ at the 2 and then go with a shooter, whether it be Grimes or DiVincenzo. There are options to use. This can't be hockey shifts where it's very clear who is playing now, and there's one spot that gets alternated out, which is probably my biggest fear.
The Knicks exist in this weird space, and I'm not sure there's another team in the league that's a good analog for them where they're good. They're looking to compete now, but I think even internally and externally with their fans, media members, everyone just recognizes this is not the team. And yet they're also at a point where you're not even banking on one of the youngsters turning this into the team. I think the ship is sailed on RJ Barrett there. You can have high hopes for Quentin Grimes or Immanuel Quickley, but I don't think anyone's looking at, even if they reach their 99th percentile outcome, they've elevated the Knicks to title contenders. And I think this is a correct assumption. People think it's about the Thunder. I think it'd be more correct about the Knicks. They are going to push their chips in at some point. It's just going to happen. That's not saying they suck. I think it's just a fact. How has the emergence of Jalen Brunson as just an all-NBA caliber player shifted how that search needs to unfold?
In 2 ways. First, I'm assuming we talked a year ago and said that the Knicks need 2 stars, right? They were 2 superstars away, right? Because neither of us thought Jalen Brunson was going to be a superstar. I think I was higher. I was higher on him than you, but I knew they had a potential all-star here.
It was probably phrased where it's now you would probably still say they need a player, I would argue, who is better than Jalen Brunson to pair with Jalen Brunson. I probably said you need 2 players better than Jalen Brunson, which I don't think you need anymore.
I would have agreed with that a year ago. And now, after watching what Brunson gave us in the playoffs, bro, if anybody else shows up in game 6 against the Heat, I'm literally one other player. They lost by 4 points in that game, and Jalen Brunson had 40 of them. One other person shows up. If Tibbs shows up, if RJ goes 1 for 10, Julius goes 3 of 14, Quickley doesn't play. If one other person, the only person that showed up for him was Scott Foster, and then he's a hero. I think I tickled Dan. If one other person shows up in that game, he's a hero that forced the game 7 back to MSG. That's how high I am on Jalen Brunson. Yes, you do need to go get, if you want to contend for a title and go get another guy, this isn't the roster. But I'm at the point where there's one untouchable on the roster right now, and it's Jalen Brunson. And that wasn't the case a year ago. The thing that's fascinating, if you look at what this offseason was, is because the untouchable is Jalen Brunson, the Knicks are out on the point guard trade market. Dame was never a conversation for me. And there's some
even there was reporting on Harden. I don't even think that was a real conversation.
It's not.
That was oh, is the Philly just looking to salary dump him? Okay, then let's talk. But like the
I
fact
think
that we're
if you're
here.
trading for James Harden, it's like you said, because you're then flipping James Harden. Like maybe the Knicks would have tried to make that work for a year. I don't think, look, there's a trade the Knicks might want to make with the 76ers. It's not for James Harden, So
Yeah,
that's,
they do love Daniel House. Yeah, you're right.
yes, yes. Oh, Tobias Harris, Long Island native. No, we obviously know who the big fish is on the Sixers that the Knicks want. CAA client, Joel Embiid. I think that it's been really fascinating to be like, yeah, it was never realistic that they were going to go in after Harden. And there's been nothing. Like Stephen A. Smith said, go get Dame. And there's been nothing that's come out from the Knicks that are like, yeah, we're interested in Dame. And which
I do like the
wouldn't
idea
make
of
sense to
Dame.
do it either.
I will say I like the idea of Dame next to Jalen Brunson way more than I do James Harden, who just doesn't play off the ball well at all. And you could, what would be your, like, why would you like James?
I wouldn't like either. I wouldn't like either.
No. I
see what
don't
you're
think
saying.
they should go after either. But if it was between the two and they were gonna do this, it's not even like close for me. I would just be like, no, it'd be Dame that I'd want to see over Harden next to Jalen Brunson. I want to see neither. Let me just make that clear.
I'm choosing option C. If you're telling me there's no option C, I would also choose Dame over Harden. But that's like the takeaway of the season is that they're out on the point guard market. They got it. Like now they need to surround him. It's the Trae Young model is how they need to build the roster and hopefully do it better.
Yeah, I was say.
Well, just like you need to surround him with defense and shooting. Like you need to make sure you have average to above average defender. Honestly, you probably need elite around him because of his size. He is a small guard that gets picked on a lot against good teams, especially good teams with good point guards. So while he's going to have an elite offensive ability that, the other teams are honestly not even going to be able to stop, you're going to have to somewhat hide him on the defensive end.
Is there like I know there's the Joel Embiid stuff that's thrown around out there. I tend to think more that, and this is dependent on availability, but I think we can frame it this way because Joel Embiid's not available right now either. I just feel like it needs to be sort of this power wing that like the combo 2-3-4 guy, a little bit more positionless with size than they have right now, where it's, yeah, they have some really good rebounding undersized guards, but the wings on this team, if we're talking like true blue wings, RJ Barrett comes the closest to filling that criteria, and he does not fill it. It's just because he's that 6'7" body where everyone else, like the DiVincenzos and the Quentin Grimes and the Josh Harts are like these 6'5", 6'4", 6'6", like not wings. Like they're like swingmen or Josh Hart even feels like more of a forward, even though he's like smaller. So I think that are there, regardless of whether it's a big, what they fall, are there any names aside from Embiid that you just have circled that you're monitoring? I'm not talking right now. I'm not even talking about this year's trade deadline, but like, let's look forward to the 2025 trade deadline. Like, what names do you just have circled?
Is Mikal Bridges potentially available on another team in 2025? Not on the Nets.
I do. So I diverge from you where I do think the Nets would trade him to the Knicks if they get to the point where they're moving him. I honestly don't think the front office that's in place, from what I know about the team when I was there more, I don't think Sean Marks gives a fuck. And so I believe that if they were going that route, they are not going to look at it as like, whoa, we can't trade him to the team in the same city who we're trying to be worse than right now. And even though divisions don't really fucking matter anymore, like I don't see that, whereas you do. Maybe there's something I'm missing there, but from what I understand, I just don't think that would be an issue.
Listen, you're probably right. In fact, probably you're right. I'm of the mentality that I'll see it. I'll believe it when I see it. Like I'll wait until the trade happens before I consider it a possibility. Like the Knicks and Heat have made one trade ever. It was for Pat Riley to be the Knicks head coach. Like
Pat Riley's still there. Like,
to be the Heat head coach. Be the Heat head coach. Excuse me.
Yeah, but like Pat Riley's still there running that show. So like I get that a little bit more. Where it's
Brooklyn is trying. Like Brooklyn doesn't want to help further a Knicks agenda of let's put the 2016 Villanova Wildcats all on the same roster. Like, I don't think they're going to help facilitate that.
If you're trying to be good, you absolutely don't want to do that. If you're entering a different phase of your existence, you can't afford to care. As the Nets, I'm not talking about if there are two teams that are on this, like, let's forget about Mikal Bridges. Let's just say there was a trade between them now. They're both trying to be good, be 4 or 5 seeds in the East, whatever. And there could be a mutually beneficial trade for them. I could see that being a factor. But if you are pivoting this into a directional shift as Brooklyn, which, by the way, I would predict is coming. I don't know if it's this season, But this idea that they're going to kind of float around like in 6 and 5 and 7, like it's cute. It's not going to happen. They will enter a rebuild. That is my prediction. I would say by the start of 24-25. I'd be shocked if they're not rebuilding. So
how long do those Harden picks last? Like how long do they have until those expire? Because that's a cat. There is a caveat,
but Sean Marks has already done the thing where it's like your picks are gone. I don't think he cares about that. I mean, it's a factor.
Fair. Yeah.
But I think if it gets to a point where, well, what are we doing here? We might be sending a pick that's like as currently constructed. They might send top 10 picks out every year.
Anyway, yeah.
So, all
right, maybe. I'll believe it when I see it. This is across all sports. Like the Mets and Yankees don't make trades. The Jets and Giants have made one in the last 2 decades. Like this is just like Rangers and Islanders have never made a trade. Like this is a thing that happens in the city. If it happens, like you might be right that the narrative of New York teams not trading with each other might be enough that it doesn't matter. Miles Bridges is not the player I'm trying to mention. Mikal Bridges is the ideal dream scenario. The probably more available one is OG Anunoby, and the CAA of it all. You want to talk about things I noticed this offseason. It equally as important as Julius leaving CAA was OG Anunoby joining CAA.
My opinion is,
yeah,
as long as Mitchell Robinson is here, the Knicks have enough players who have higher turnover rates than assist rates. That's just.
But when you're putting guys next to Jalen Brunson, they need to be above average 3-point shooters and elite defenders. He fills both of those boxes. And look, you want to talk about opening up usage for, he'd probably go out for RJ or come here for RJ or Quickley. But like, because he's not going to command such a high usage, that opens up the potential for more Quentin Grimes shots or more, whichever one stays, Quickley or RJ shots. You know, I wonder if you run into the same issue of him or Josh Hart needing to be on the court, one or the other. But defensively, those are the two types of players, along with Quentin Grimes, that you'd want to put next to Jalen Brunson. And it's why I'd absolutely be interested in an OG Anunoby trade, personally.
It would depend on price for me. He is entering the final year of his deal. I tend to be lower just on his offense than most other people, but he has done a good job coming away as a shooter. But because I had Mikal Bridges on my list and you mentioned OG Anunoby, is there an element of, and it's twofold, that Jalen Brunson is good enough and that if we inject like real spacing into this team, it doesn't need to be we're waiting on a Joel Embiid trade. We're hoping the Clippers implode and Paul George becomes available. That'd be another fantastic fit, by the way, even though he's older. We're sitting there waiting for it's going to go wrong in Phoenix at some point, and Devin Booker is going to need to request out. Has Jalen Brunson changed at all where the potential of this team, or even if you don't inject, I'll keep saying caps lock, bold text, italics, superstar, an OG Anunoby level player or Mikal Bridges level player could really infuse this team with like a higher plane of purpose where maybe they're not one of the 3 foremost contenders, but like there's a scenario where they come out of the East.
I mean, we did just see an 8th seed get to the finals last year, and
that's like real alien shit. Like
it is. Okay,
what's going on in Miami is I don't care about the numbers. I watched the games. It's alien shit. Yeah. I don't know what is, and if it happens again and they don't get Dame and they just let 2 rotation players leave for nothing, extraterrestrial shit. Like I don't understand what's going on in there.
I agree, and it's why like when I saw them doing it to the Celtics too, I just pointed at what was going on. I was very much LeBron in that meme of J.R. Smith. I was like, to Knicks fans, see, they do it to everybody.
You mentioned the Celtics, by the way, the real galaxy brain thing, and it's not going to be the player that you think I'm about to say, is it goes so wrong there. Jason Tatum's like, no, I'm not signing my Supermax. And then it's like, that's the name. That is the name.
I hinted at this with John that he can technically like request a trade next offseason. I also think like the Lakers are the team that like if he's gonna go anywhere, it's gonna go play for Kobe's old team. I think he's gonna sign
what Austin Reeves and 2 picks. That's not getting you Jason Tatum.
No, well he'll leave. He could just leave in 2 years. Like he'll go.
Oh, that's first of all, that's not happening because the league has essentially neutered free agency. I'll be shocked if if we see a caliber of that player just walk in free agency.
Listen, if the Bucks say we're not trading you, Giannis, we may get that there too.
So all right. I guess the difference would be, is Jason Tatum a player you play it out with? If he doesn't guarantee he'll come back, the answer is yes. But if you have, and the answer is yes with Giannis, like it was with KD and OKC. The difference is if they're actually requesting out, you don't play it out.
Kevin Durant requested out. The only reason he got traded is because he got hurt and Kyrie went. Well, Kyrie, like they were 20-2 at one point last year.
So the thing I disagree about though is that if Kyrie's trade request came and Kevin Durant was healthy, the Kevin Durant trade request would have followed anyway, because hey, that's what happened over the offseason. They were both healthy. Kyrie requested a trade. It didn't work out well. Then Kevin Durant issued his mandate and then he played takebacks on it. So
you're saying that. So you're saying, because that is what happened last offseason, that Kyrie asked for a trade. They said no. He opted in for the final
year. They did tell him to go find one for like a sign and trade, and he couldn't.
Well, except like go be a Laker was the only thing. And the Nets were like, we don't want the Lakers package. And then what's it called? Then like during the day of free trade, and then you get during the season. I'll never forget the day that Kyrie asked for a trade. John and I were doing a Patreon pod. Macri and I were doing a Patreon pod. And we were saying, like, if you had to put a hypothetical $100 chip on a championship winner right now, or an Eastern Conference winner right now, who would it be? And I said, the healthy version of Brooklyn. He's like, man, that's my answer too, because of what they looked like. And I wonder if, like, winning being the cure-all, if you just don't play it out, if your guys ask for a trade, if you're saying that Kyrie would have asked for a trade, even if they were 30-2 on that day, then yeah, maybe that's like enough of a nuclear situation. I don't know that Giannis and Jason Tatum are going to make things that nuclear.
Well, and I think the difference there though is Kyrie's trade value had reached a nadir. And so even if you decided not to trade him, or maybe he doesn't request a trade, you decided, because you didn't offer him an extension that he wanted, that you were going to let it play out anyway and risk him leaving. Kevin Durant had already signed an extension. That situation plays out so much differently if he was in a contract year. They wouldn't have been like, no, we're just going to play this out after the Kevin Durant trade request. And so if Jason Tatum is cagey and won't request a trade or say he's not coming back, and ditto for Giannis, those teams have to play it out if they believe they have a chance of keeping him.
I agree. And I also, there's one team I think Tatum would go to. Like, it is absolutely one team. Like, it's very much the Dame situation, except Tatum is closer to free agency. Like, I think he would walk and go to the Lakers.
I said it was Galaxy brain. I don't think it's going to be, I would be shocked if he walks. Like, it would be a trade to me. That would be my guess. But I guess the
Lakers cap sheet is pretty clean in 2 years.
And look, we're getting to the point where these guys make so much money that it doesn't matter, like, to pass on the long-term security. But the trend that we have seen,
I agree with you. I think he's going to sign an extension next summer. I'm saying if there's one alternative reality, I think it's to walk to go to the Lakers. I think there's one version of Jason Tatum's career that he'd be okay pivoting to that isn't an entire career with the Celtics. It's going and playing for Kobe's old team.
This has predictably gone off the rails. So my final question on kind of the trade front was
real quick. I agree with you about Paul George, by the way. Paul George, I don't think that's realistic for this offseason, and who knows about, he's the perfect. Oh,
you mean this offseason that ends in like 36 hours?
Well, no, so like there was a portion of this offseason when the Knicks were thought of potentially to be the third team in a James Harden trade, where it's like, we'll send you the depth and the pick pieces that you need, Clippers. Just send us Paul George. And you build around Kawhi, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, and, RJ Barrett, or whatever you want to call the rest of that roster. And like Paul George is then your backup four. He's the perfect wing to play off of, like Josh Hart and Julius Randle, and would anchor Tibbs' defense and off-ball defense the way that he needs you to. I'm right there with you on Paul George. I don't know how realistic it is anymore.
In a way, it would be the ideal scenario, but you need the Clippers not to sign him or Kawhi to an extension, which I think is probably fair to say they won't. Like, I don't know what if they want the max, like, I don't know what you're, like, based off their availability the past few years, I don't know how you offer that. It would have to be, oh, shit went sideways again in LA. There's another injury that's not Paul George that has thrown their season, into the fire. James Harden isn't there, of course. Like the Sixers didn't trade him there. And Paul George is just like, hey, I'm leaving after the season. So you get him middle of the year. They don't really have any leverage, so the price point is so low. This is kind of a nice segue into my question, though. Is there any worry or concern that the Knicks' best trade offers have diminished in shine? And I want to phrase it this way, not because I think that they have no assets, but when you kind of look at the Wizards and Pistons picks, you can't guarantee those will ever convey. The fact that they're protected so far out and they get a little looser, okay, great. The Bucks pick is looking a lot more valuable because of what Giannis said. So that's a plus. However, we've already seen RJ Barrett's on his new deal, not nearly as valuable as he was even this time last summer. Like there was still more of a mystery box appeal to him. IQ is headed that same direction in the sense that maybe he's viewed more highly around the league, but because he's getting off his rookie scale, we just see look at how perception of Tyler Hero and Jordan Poole changed as soon as they signed their second contracts. They've already gotten off of Obi, who got them 2 second-round picks. And now when you look at the Knicks' own picks, you can still say, hey, we're going to short the future of the Knicks because the Knicks are the Knicks are the Knicks are the Knicks. If you're giving them a good player and they have Jalen Brunson, the Knicks are not going to Knicks. Like the Knicks are going to be good, and that'll be the new Knicks. Like that's what Knicksing will be. So I look at it and say, if you get into these really competitive, the Joel Embiid sweepstakes, the Jason Tatum sweepstakes that you and I have just manifested, apparently, like once you get to that level, how confident are you that they can actually cobble together the best offer now? Like I do think, and I think this is a good thing that Jalen Brunson has changed so much for them. I don't know if they have the same asset firepower they did a year or 2 years ago, like the mystique of it all. And part of the mystique was, oh, it's the Knicks. So like, if you can get a future Knicks pick in 2027, that's going to mean a lot. This is a testament to what the Knicks are now, but I don't think a 2027 Knicks pick is actually all that valuable anymore.
Man, I disagree. I think the number one thing that James Dolan does for this franchise is the best thing that he hates owning, that he doesn't like to be the owner of. But the number one thing he can always do for this franchise, at least at current time, is that teams will always value their picks more because they are convinced something he owns will crash and burn. Do I recognize that they don't have rookie scale guys to trade, and like the Dallas tanking so that way they get 10 instead of the Knicks getting 11 did kind of mess with their plans? Sure, but I also think like going into next offseason, if Dallas gets the 13th pick, the Knicks could potentially have 2 picks in this upcoming draft to offer teams. Maybe a 2027 Knicks pick might not be as valuable, especially if they have Giannis or Embiid and Jalen Brunson.
Or Jason Tatum.
Who knows?
We need to start. This needs to be a thing. Like, let's get the Jason Tatum
watch.
Yeah. Going.
Yes, people go with Photoshop. Get on that. Look, because the Knicks they've had a nice little 3-year run. They've had a nice 3-year stretch of competence that I think has raised their Q rating to a point where we're finally talking about basketball, right? It doesn't change
for this portion of the podcast.
Well, so like even last year during the Donovan Mitchell sweepstakes, right? We were told that like 3 Knicks picks are going to be super valuable because if you can bet on a team to fuck up over the next 10 years, it's going to be the Knicks. And if you're telling me in 2027, when Giannis or Embiid are still there, it's not as valuable, fine. But if you're stretching these things out to 2032, like what's more likely in 2032? James Dolan's team is going to be good or James Dolan's team is going to be bad? And that's the calculation that a lot of teams are going to make. And it's what I've been standing on. The Knicks still have all their picks to offer. They can throw in all these, protected,
that Milwaukee pick. I think that might actually be their best asset at this point, best singular asset, unless you think a 2030 Knicks pick.
I think the 2031 Knicks pick right now is like, who knows what that could be? It's not even necessarily a golden ticket. It's just like, we've seen this team give out golden tickets, have golden tickets because they're bad and not know what to do with them.
I get that. I do think though, and maybe this was always the case, that they're probably a little bit more reliant on whatever star becomes available, like naming them as a team that they want to go to than they probably were
Which
like
they
a
always
year or so
do.
ago.
Which they always do.
Well, yes, but I'm saying like we've seen scenarios where the team just go like Paul George and OKC, they go out and trade for him anyway. Kawhi in Toronto. Maybe that happens with Dame. I wouldn't expect it to, but I would love it to. Let's get to the cookie cutter portion of this podcast. Is there any under the radar strengths and or concerns about the Knicks we have not really discussed yet?
It's literally one strength that it's one concern that I have, and it's what if Julius Randle goes down? Like, I'm fine with Josh Hart as your backup four. I'm not as confident in it if he's your starting four. Now, maybe this could lead to Tibbs finding religion and going to some smaller lineups with RJ at the four or Josh Hart at the four and just maximizing shooting as much as possible. You get either Fournier or Deuce McBride in the rotation. Dear God, don't let it be just, I'm going to go to Jericho Sims because then I'll lead the league in rim protection and offensive rebounds. Like, great. Here comes the zone again. I still think that the Knicks' strength last year was their physicality, led by Julius Randle being like a dominant force, going to the rim and making you honor his 3-point shot. So if he goes down, I do think that is a step down for the Knicks, where they just, it's the sneaky part about keeping Obi last year that a lot of Knicks fans had an issue with is like Julius Randle went down in the playoffs and they needed Obi Toppin like to help them win a couple playoff games in the first round. So they don't have that luxury this year.
I think mine would be, and it's a concern rather than a strength, not to be too pessimist, is just like the Mitchell Robinson high stakes experience because of how limited he can be on offense. I actually think he did earlier on in the season, specifically, like we saw a little bit, he got smarter on handoffs. I felt like he was making more decisions than he normally did on offense. But like when you're in crunch time, I feel like he poses, his defense and rebounding is so valuable. But we've already talked about a center. We didn't name Mitchell Robinson as the center. He was 4 of 12 from the foul line in crunch time. He didn't go there often, but he shot 33% in crunch time at the foul line. Can he improve at all in free throws to where if you're going to have to one where you don't think about pulling him in crunch time, then if he's on the floor, teams won't look to kind of foul him. Now, it helps that once you get inside 2 minutes, like you're not going to commit the off-ball fouls anyway, but I'm even talking like 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter or something.
Well, so this actually would lead to a strength and a concern. He was so dominant in that Cavs series, like completely neutralized Mobley and Allen to the point where
I'm pretty sure his shoulders were like still tattooed on the chest of Evan Mobley. I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure, but
man, that game 5 where him and Josh Hart, they had as many rebounds as the Cavs was just, it was insane to see how much his offensive rebounding became not just like a strength, but the reason that they're going to advance to the next round. And then Spo neutralized it. Spo looked at the same crunch time free throw numbers that you're looking at. And the strategy for the Heat all playoffs or all series against the Knicks was if Mitch gets a rebound, you foul him. Like, he's not getting putbacks. He can get as many rebounds as he wants. If he gets an offensive rebound, make him earn 2 shots at the line. And like we saw over those 6 games, like he was just completely neutralized. It was to the point where it should have been a Hartenstein series, but I digress. It's a note, and we'll see how they navigate if teams recognize what the Heat did and maybe, resort to making Mitch beat you at the line rather than just accepting, he got the rebound and here comes the dunk,
I am hopeful that, again, he wasn't like this amazing passer, but I thought there was just a little bit more decision-making layers to his offense last year. And so maybe hopeful that, hey, could he hit 50% of his free throws rather than like, what was he at last year? He's gone down every 50, 40% or whatever it was. So
I'm less hopeful than you are.
39.4. I gave him too much credit with the 40% mark.
Yeah.
I apologize.
Yeah. I think I know it's similar to Julius. It is what it is, but like on a less elite scale of like, I don't think Mitch is ever going to be all NBA, but I think he's like a top 12 center in the league. And especially when what he's elite at is one of the best in the league, with offensive rebounding.
Quick point of clarification. I was talking about the playoffs. I think he was closer to 50% in the regular season. So go Mitch. You're really efficient at the foul line.
Real quick, that game 5 against the Heat where they went to hack a Mitch and he made like 5 of 6 of his free throws. It was one of the funniest experiences. Like, our season's on the line and Mitchell Robinson is at the line to save it.
Yeah,
I
why?
wonder what's going to happen.
Look, we're reading into an Immanuel Quickley small postseason sample. We're reading into an RJ Barrett postseason sample. We're reading into a Julius Randle. But let's read into the Mitchell Robinson free throw experience.
Exactly. Yeah.
50, 40, 90 from him last year, next year confirmed. So when you look at the 10-man rotation, building the top 10 guys that are going to play the most for this team, it feels like there are 9 locks. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on any of these. Jalen Brunson, Quentin Grimes, RJ Barrett, Julius Randle, Mitchell Robinson, Josh Hart, Donte DiVincenzo, Immanuel Quickley, and Isaiah Hartenstein all feel like they're just locks to be in the regular rotation.
I think not only are those the locks, I think that's the rotation.
If you're extending it to the next, is it like Deuce McBride? Is it Evan Fournier? Like who is getting like the 10th spot?
I think it's Deuce McBride.
Like you think like breaking case of emergency type 10th, or like we might see some real Deuce McBride?
Breaking case of emergency. I think they're going to stick with the 9-man rotation that worked so well last year. It gives more minutes to Quickley. It gives more minutes to Josh Hart, more minutes to, like, they have some super subs. And with DiVincenzo, I don't think DiVincenzo came here to just be like a backup. I think he recognizes that they're allocating one rotation spot to someone's minutes in the 9-man. So that's I think part of the calculation.
This will be matchup dependent, I think, or rhythm dependent on the game. But you can build one preferred crunch time unit. The closest thing, the best one that comes close to one size fits all. Let's phrase it. What is that for this team?
Jalen Brunson, Immanuel Quickley, Josh Hart, Julius Randle, and then I'll say Mitch, but I mean a center.
A center is fair. So
Jericho Sims. Yes, Jericho Sims if he's available. No, like it's him or Hartenstein. Like I actually do think they're interchangeable, but I would say Mitch with the caveat that like I was very okay when Isaiah Hartenstein was closing last year.
Is there a weirdo, unconventional, quirky lineup that you would like to see them try?
So I have 2, and then I have one that is like the worst lineup ever that I could see Tibbs trying once. These are the never going to happen lineups that we go to every year.
That's what this question is meant to be. Yeah, that's what it's meant to be.
So it's Randle at center for both of these lineups. In one lineup, I've got Randle.
Now we know it's not going to happen,
right? So Randle at center, Josh Hart, and then your two corner boys, Grimes and DiVincenzo, and then IQ as the point guard. So this could be like a second unit where you go small, and you have Randle be your center. You've got 5 guys. Like Hart then becomes kind of your de facto Draymond, that he's not looking to shoot at all, and he can kind of distribute and push on the break. Maybe like get 8 assists that night, and then you just got these shooters around him, and just sub out Hart for RJ and then Quickley for JB, and it's the exact same lineup, where it's Randle at the center, and then you've got all these wings and guards going at it. In a lineup that's never going to happen. The lineup I'm afraid of is if we get some injuries and then potentially get Mitchell Robinson, Jericho Sims, RJ Barrett, Josh Hart, and Deuce McBride. And it's just like, Tibbs, they're going to play a zone, and they're all going to sit like an umbrella around the paint. And he's going to be like, yeah, but look at my rim protection. Look at my rebounding, I
think it's more likely that they would just go out and trade for Taj Gibson from Washington if that came to that scenario.
Hey, Taj Gibson, free agent right now.
No, he's with the Wizards. He signed.
Oh, did he re-sign? Oh, that's right. Yeah. He did re-sign. Shout out to
They scooped Tibbs. Man, Tibbs was banking on that for midseason, I'm sure.
There's an influence in the locker room, in the front office. Yes.
So mine would be the 4. I want to see 4 guards, and then I don't really care who the big is. If I could pick whoever, I'd say, you know what, just throw Hart at the 5, and let's go with 5 guards. But Donte DiVincenzo, Immanuel Quickley, Jalen Brunson, Quentin Grimes, pick your big. If it's Isaiah Hartenstein, it's Mitchell Robinson. Julius Randle would be kind of interesting. Maybe can we just throw Nathan Knight in there? Like, let's really go off the rails. But I would love. Sure. I want to see the 4 actual guard lineup. Like, don't try to sell me in Josh Hart or RJ Barrett as one of these guards. Those 4 guards. I'll let you pick the big. It can be whatever big you want.
I like the shooting. I like the spacing. I'm just so reserved to the fact that it's never going to happen.
But that's what this question's meant to be. We need to be able to conceive on our own accord.
There was one the last time they played the Heat during the regular season, the game Julius Randle got hurt. The closing lineup that game didn't have Jalen Brunson and didn't have Julius Randle, and I couldn't believe what my eyes were seeing. Like, Quickley closed with Grimes and RJ and Josh Hart and Hartenstein. I was like, wait a minute. This is Tibbs doing this? He's not putting Jalen Brunson back in the game. And it gave me high hopes for the playoffs. And then,
it's like,
having
I had the outer body experience. I think it was against Philly when he just decided to play Obi Toppin and Julius Randle together.
Mm-hmm.
I was like,
Game 5 of the season, Cam Reddish only played the last 8 minutes of each half. And it was like, wait, what is happening? He's literally throwing shit at the wall because he knows he's about to get fired.
Yeah, and hacks were advocating for that. I was always on the Tibbs bandwagon. Never doubted him for a minute.
It's my only question here, Dan, at the end of this, as far as like any last questions I have is, are you ready to apologize to Tom Thibodeau?
No, because I don't really know if like what strings do you think he was pulling other than like Jalen Brunson was otherworldly, Julius Randle was really good, and the roster was kind of built to like play the way that they did on it. Like what did he do? He was a little bit, I will say, it seemed like he was a little bit more experimental this year as opposed to previous years. But like, do you think Tibbs was like a driving force of their offensive success?
Absolutely. They play a style that like he personally wants. It's why the most frustrating part about the conversation with the Knicks right now is you cannot argue against their offensive rating, but you can argue about how they got there. It's a team that maximized the possession game, and like they really not great in efficiency. Although when Josh Hart got there, the efficiency got better. But this is a team that was made in Tibbs' identity and played in Tibbs' identity. Low risk, low turnovers, high offensive rebounds, get to the line. Like he didn't find religion in like suddenly the Warriors showed up. It wasn't like the splits and ball movement. No, it was like exactly what you saw from Derrick Rose in the early 2010s,
I would almost, all right, that got you the same thing it's always got you is like a bunch of regular season success.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot about, will there be more movement on this team now that Donte DiVincenzo's here? And I kind of feel like, yeah, him letting the second units kind of play really fast, like I guess he deserves some, but no, I'm not apologizing. If he wants an apology, the Knicks need to do better than average 88 points per 100 possessions in the half court in the playoffs. And then I will apologize.
So it's the playoff sample size is what we're
judging. Well, it's also,
judging
you mentioned, I don't think you can inherit. It was very Grizzlies-esque, the way that they had their offensive success during the regular season where you don't inherently trust it. And I guess it's fair to say the roster was built in the image of Tibbs rather than like he was coaching around it. So that's fair. But then like, that kind of makes me less inclined to apologize to him.
Look, I'm mostly fucking with you. You don't need to apologize to Tom Thibodeau ever. He doesn't.
There are people heavily, I will say there are people who seem like they're heavily invested in Tom Thibodeau's success, or in my DMs after I wrote that article last year. We're very unhappy. And luckily, I actually haven't heard from them since that. So
what CAA clients are in your DMs? Goodness.
Tom
Thibodeau, CAA client, by the way.
One of them could have been Tom Thibodeau for all I
could have. Yeah. I don't think he knows how to navigate Twitter. I think he's looking for the Synergy app on his phone.
He doesn't understand the social part of social media. So I'd be shocked if it was actually
true.
him.
Yes.
Okay. So they're over under, like so many other teams, by the way. This is the year of 44.5. That's what the Knicks over under is set on. So the first part of this is, are you taking the over or the under on that?
Yes, over.
Do you have you were very quick on that. I think the quickest answer we've had we're 15 look aheads in. That's the quickest answer I've gotten.
I think they're going to win 50 games this year.
Okay. Now, to that end, how many teams in the East are you prepared to say guarantee will be better than the Knicks this season?
Guarantee. I think Milwaukee will be better. I think Boston will be better. I answered this with Justin from the Chase Down, Justin Rowan. Our mutual friend.
Look ahead.
Yeah,
Great
yeah.
guy.
I was gonna say, like, he asked me this a couple weeks ago, and I've like changed my answer so many times. I think the Cavs will be better than the Knicks this year. I love what they did with their offseason. Just studying them and then watching them over those 5 games, and it's like, oh, you have 4 guys really, and you really need to add like a 5th guy or a rotation of 5th guys that you can throw at teams. And they went and got Strus. They went and got George Niang. I think they've put shooting in places that they need to put shooting, and I just really like what they've done. I think they're built for regular season success and playoff success for that matter. Philly's the interesting one.
They're not. It's done. It's over.
It's okay, but is it regular season over?
Yeah. So James Harden's either gonna be upset that he's still there, or you're gonna move him for who and what. Like if you end up parlaying him into Dame or another star, maybe. But like there's just Nick Nurse is talking about Joel Embiid playing more games and more minutes than he normally. This team is built to fail right now, unless there's some miraculous resolution to the James Harden soap opera.
So, is there a version of this team that's like 2 years ago where when the Sixers made the Ben Simmons for James Harden trade, they were the 2 seed? Is there a version of this team that with Joel Embiid being an MVP candidate again, they're a 4 seed?
No. You need I love Tyrese Maxey. You would need a mega leap from him. And I just don't know. I wouldn't be, could they be better than the Knicks? Yes. Are you guaranteeing it though? Is my point here. No.
I respect Joel Embiid a ton. I'm not just saying that because I want him to come play for my basketball team. He
got married in the Hamptons. He's already in a New York state of mind. So
yes, listen, as someone who got married on Long Island this summer, I respect you, Joel Embiid, for having good taste. I'm not closing the door. Like you said, I'm not going to guarantee the Sixers will be better than the Knicks. I think that's the 4-5 this year, and I'm not sure who has home court.
What about the teams you named? Just to give my answer, I have the Cavs. Might actually be my most confident pick looking at just the regular season. I'm going to throw Milwaukee in there because the top end talent's still good. There's age injury concerns. I'm going to pick Boston, but my spicy take is just like there is more implosion potential there than I think people realize functionally.
Interesting. Wow.
Those are the 3. And then there's the whole, I wouldn't guarantee Philly. I'm not guaranteeing Atlanta. The one that's tough for me is just like, do we just assume Miami gets Dame? Because if it's Dame, Bam, and Jimmy Butler, they're going to be better than the Knicks. Like so that'll be a team.
That's the caveat I wrote down is this is as is. Like if the Heat are there, then yeah, they're probably in the 4 or 5. And then maybe the Knicks or the Sixers are the 5.
I will say, and I mean this as a comment, the Knicks floor in this Eastern Conference should be 6.
Yeah.
That should be their floor. Just because it's the 3 teams we named. And then you can say, all right, maybe both Philly and Miami are better, or maybe Atlanta really just for some reason. I don't know why. Perhaps Quinn Snyder makes a big difference. I'm still not super high on their roster. A team like that comes up, like maybe Indiana just pops or just something along those lines. 6 should be their floor. If my only pushback against that, and we mentioned this already, is like a worst case scenario for the Knicks is like, is Julius Randle still on this every other season track? Is just, I'm not banking on it. And I think because you have Jalen Brunson, it's so much different than following his MIP campaign. But like that's among the like things looming over the specter of this season.
You literally took my answer to my response to what Julius may not be all in. Well, I don't think he's going to be all NBA this year.
Typical hater.
You
leave CAA and you're all like, Julius Randle, like take it.
Listen, I'd be singing a different tune if you hadn't left the family. But as Mr. Corleone once said, you never take sides against the family, just the Randle. Look, Julius may regress a ton this year. The stability and calming force that I believe Jalen Brunson is allows me to believe in the floor that you're projecting, and it's why I probably have the Knicks as the 4 seed right now. I could see them getting up to a 3 seed given the schedule or some injuries happen to Boston or Milwaukee or Cleveland. Who knows? But look, I'm riding high off this post Josh Hart team. After they traded for Josh Hart, they were number 1 in offense, number 2 in net rating, and everybody's issues with the team were like, oh, their true shooting's not great, their effective field goal percentage is not great, it's a fake offense that just takes advantage of rebounds. Well, after the Josh Hart trade, it's a 25 game sample size, which to me is long enough of a sample size to make some kind of conclusion. They were 7th in effective field goal percentage and 7th in true shooting. That's long enough for me to say this. And it's not like they were just playing a bunch of tanking teams. There's 3 wins against the Heat in that stretch. There's 2 wins against Boston, 1 in Boston during that stretch. Like they were going up against teams that they were going to be contending with in the Eastern Conference. 1 win in Cleveland, by the way. And it's enough of a sample size for me to say that's a team that's going to compete next year. Granted, no injuries happen, and granted, the Heat don't get Dame, which I don't think they will.
Ooh, that's fairly spicy. If you don't think they're gonna get Dame,
I think Joe Cronin is dug in enough that we're to the point where he'll either out of spite keep Dame and be like, fine, ruin your legacy in Portland, or maybe there's a Masai trade out there. I don't think Philly at this point has the assets. I just don't know how. Like what do you do? Like trade him for Harden? Maybe there's a 3-team deal where a team that wants Harden gets him. But I think he's at the point. If first of all, we both know if Scotty Barnes is on the table, that's the trade. But I think we're at the point where him to Miami, they've gone all in on like, you're going to trade him here. And as someone who waited for Donovan Mitchell to become a Knick all last offseason for that not to happen, the situation feels very similar.
I root for randomness and chaos, so I hope that you're actually correct.
Yes.
Claudio, are you able to tell our listeners where they can find you and all the magnificent work that you do?
Of course, you could find Knicks Film School on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, you name it. Threads, if you're looking for a Twitter alternative, even though we don't use it. At Nick.
Great promotion.
At Knick Film School. So the word Knick spelt like the New York Knicks, film, and then SKOOL because we're cool like that. We got a ton of pods leading up to this offseason. Ton of pods that have taken us through the offseason, and then some pods that are leading up to training camp, and then the preseason and regular season start. We go live after every game. We have off day podcasts when they're not playing. We have pregame podcasts the days they are playing. We have Twitter Spaces shows. We have mailbags, Q&As. We have a Patreon if you want to check it out. We have the Knicks covered wall to wall. And it's always great when a good friend like Dan Favale lets you on to come and talk about the work that you do, because I respect the work that this man does at all times.
Oh, stop it. But yes, Knicks Film School, you guys are a behemoth. Great work. So go follow them. The links to where you can Patreon and just where you can subscribe to the pod will be in the YouTube and podcast description. Congratulations, Claudio. You now officially have the longest look ahead so far. And I will hazard, I don't think I'm going to have another 100-minute look ahead this summer. So thank you so much. And as you know by now, I will be spamming you again in the future for another appearance. Thanks so much.
Of course.